He was born in London, England, has lived most of his life in South Africa. For the last 6 years, Naples, Florida has been his home. He's the author of the book, A Big Life, subtitled Ordinary People Led by an Extraordinary God, forward by Chuck Colson, afterward by our good friend Mike Huckabee. Peter Hone, welcome to today's Issues.
Thank you, guys. It's nice to be here.
Tell us something about Big Life. I know a little bit about it. Some friends who've been impacted by the work. I know that there's the book, A Big Life, but behind it, there's Big Life Ministries, and this is becoming a worldwide movement. So, Peter, tell us the story behind the book and behind the movement.
Well, Big Life, to put it in a very prefaced way, over the last 10 years, it's moved from our church here in sleepy Naples to 100,000 people worshiping Jesus weekly in 12 different countries in the 1040 window. So it's been a remarkable movement of God, this ministry. It's very, very biblical. It's been called by various people acts in action. Basically, the church is the body. It's not a building. And what Big Life do is they very simply take indigenous Christians in whatever country it may be, and they bring other people to Christ in their own culture and their own language. And it's multiplication, exactly as it says in the book of Acts. And this fascinated me. I first met John Hirama, the executive director of Big Life, in 2008. I was teaching Sunday school to his son, Jack. And I got to meet John, and I was a men's group. I said, he's a real nice, good Christian guy. And then I was stunned when somebody told me that, well, he's a little more than that, because he sold his business to raise funds to start this ministry, Big Life. So I started to dig into exactly how the ministry was formed, and I found that John had traveled mainly to India, but to Iran and other countries in excess of 50 times, trying to find out what God was doing with him. And he was driven, and eventually John was led to start Big Life in its current form. It's an amazing story. The second part of the book, which I started writing after I went to India in 2009. The second part is my own journey there. I went to check out the ministry to see if these numbers were really true, and I met the most amazing men of God. Seems a strange thing to say, but I found the same Jesus Christ in India that we have in the U.S. I found the same love and the same support. I found community, and I found incredibly godly men. And part two of the book is a lot of the stories that these guys have told of their own, often difficult journeys. There's a lot of persecution from not just from Muslims, but from Hindus too. A lot of it from their own family. Some of the stories are heartbreaking. But when the Lord's got hold of you, He's got hold of you. And what we see today is this amazing ministry.
Peter, where does the title, it's fascinating, Big Life, who came up with that, and what does the phrase Big Life imply?
Well, when John was first convicted, he tells the story that he was at home with Kathy. They were running the very, very successful landscaping business. And they were sitting on their carpet one day with their kids and just, talking about what a perfect life they have. And then John was given from someone at church a book. And he read this book, and it said in there, are you leading a little life in your own little world, or are you willing to lead a big life, a life with big kingdom impact? And this rocked John. He just realized that how shallow his life really was. It wasn't perfect at all. So he set out to make a big kingdom impact, and he started he went to Iran and became the coach of. He was almost the coach of the Iran Olympic baseball team, using this as a basis to witness to very many young men. And then when 9/11 happened in 2001, he was devastated that he wasn't allowed into Iran anymore, and he thought it was all over. And then he got a call from an Indian missionary saying that they were interested in baseball too. And the last thing John wanted to do was go to India, because he thought there were millions of missionaries there already. But God had him go there. He fought with God all the way on the plane. And he had an epiphany the day before he came back to the U.S. In an Indian church, which is obviously told in the book. And that also rocked him. And then his journey started. It's a incredible story of what God does. When I finished reading it, or writing it, I read it. When I read it for the first time as a book, I try to read it as a reader, not as the author. I was just struck by how God was controlling everything. Everything that happened over 10 years was all God. And it was just an amazing, amazing story. And the numbers today are just incredible. When I'd finished writing the book, there are 45,000 salvations recorded, and these are people who meet weekly to worship. By the time Mike Huckabee had written the afterword, that was 15 months later. The numbers had risen to 70,000, and today there's 8,000 churches meeting and over 100,000 worshippers.
Where?
Well, it moved from India into the countries surrounding India in the subcontinent, Nepal and Bhutan and Bangladesh.
How do you track this kind of thing?
Oh, every week there's attendance tracked every week. The numbers are usually a few months behind because obviously there's a lag. But the numbers are tracked very, very carefully. They're very very accurate.
You know, Peter, clearly you guys are working in what I guess everybody would agree, toughest part of the world.
And it got tougher because from India it moved into Pakistan,
mm-hmm.
and it became very, very, very hard to grow Pakistan. And suddenly, after a whole load of persecution, the Lord has moved, and the fastest growing country right now is Afghanistan, believe it or not.
You know, Chuck Colson in his foreword called this part of the new wave of missions in the world. And you mentioned earlier the acts in action approach. How is what Big Life is doing a little bit different in perspective maybe than what we think about as traditional missionary work?
Well, Chuck Colson writes about it in the foreword there. He says that the need to train missionaries and send them to foreign countries with their families to be assimilated. Their children have to be educated. It takes a long time to get to understand the culture of the new country you've moved to. He says that's not necessary. To train in-country indigenous Christians to witness to other to Muslims and Hindus that they know, they understand them, they understand the culture. The benefits are huge. The multiplication that we've seen is just phenomenal, and obviously the cost factor is very, very much less than having to send missionaries in in the traditional way. That's what Chuck was talking about. And I think that Chuck always had I often heard him say that, the way to beat, or the way to win the war against the Muslims is not to fight them, is to bring them to Christ. And that's why he was such a great supporter of this ministry.
Peter Hone is our guest, Hone, author of the book A Big Life, Ordinary People Led by an Extraordinary God. It's a movement. What would you call it?
I would call it a church planting movement.
A church planting movement in parts of the world that are hostile, very hostile to Christianity. How do you plant church in India? Oh, don't they? Isn't it heavily Hindu, and don't they outlaw Christianity in some places?
They do. People think that's actually a very good question, because people think that persecution comes in mainly from Muslims, but the Hindus can be very very staunch in their approach to their beliefs, and there are very many stories in the second part of the book, in particular of Hindu. Well, I can give you one story if you allow me to. A man called Tapan lived in a village, and his wife was suffering from epilepsy and getting worse. And the village tried. It was a Hindu village, and they prayed to Ram and Krishna and everyone else that they could. They even got involved in witchcraft to try to heal her. And one day the Big Life church planters came in, and they found out about this man's wife, and they said, could we pray for her? And the Hindus said, well, why not? We've tried everything else. So they prayed for her, and she was healed within a matter of months from this epilepsy. So Tapan, the husband, sought out the Big Life church planters, and he said, I want to do what you're doing. I believe in Jesus. So he then was trained and became a church planter over the next year or so. His wife used to write out tracts, and she would go to the village every day, to the market every day. You would find the market would be in the center of 8 or 10 villages and services those villages. So there would always be a lot of people in the market. And she would go to the market and hand out tracts. And one day, Tapan was out in a medical camp, quite far away, and he got a message that his wife was ill. And so he got on the train and went home. And when he got off at the station, he saw people that he knew, and they averted their gaze from him. They didn't greet him, and he thought that was strange. And it was a very hot day, and he walked towards his house, and he saw something swinging from a tree. And when he put his hand up to shield his face, he saw that it was his wife. They'd killed her and hung her on the tree. They took his 5-year-old son away, and they told him that he was responsible for his wife's death because he changed his religion. When I interviewed him, it was a very tearful event for me. And I said to Tapan, what did you do? And he said, I prayed to Jesus, and he said, I just had this vision of him on the cross saying, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And he said, and I knew I had to forgive them. And I said to him, but these were your own family. And he said, yes, I had to forgive all of them. He said, but I didn't stop witnessing. I decided if they were going to kill me, then that would be fine. So he carried on his work. He went to the market whenever he could, proclaimed Jesus everywhere. And one day, a few months later, a man came to him and said, they've been talking about killing you, but they haven't killed you. And we think your God is protecting you. So we want to know who he is. And a year later, he